Good morning, everyone. As Paul said, I'm Emily Greising, and I'm currently serving as the president of the Alumni Association. Thank you so much for being here with us today. It's been a wonderful morning of great presentations and wonderful, engaging conversations. The GSSW Alumni Association is an opportunity for graduates to stay connected to the school, participate in committees, and also help to identify the award winners for our Distinguished Alumni Awards. Today we will honor two graduates for their contribution to the field of social work. Our Distinguished Alumni Award is presented to a GSSW graduate who has made contributions to social work education, public service, social policy and change, and the GSSW community. This award also recognizes contributions that enhance the profession of social work in the larger community and acknowledge a lifetime achievement in the service to others. This year, we will also present a new honor in recognition of a recent distinguished alumnus. This award recognizes the same qualities as the Distinguished Alumni Award, but for an alumnus who graduated within the last 10 years. As a recent graduate of the GSSW in 2007, it is an honor to share this connection with this year's winners. Here to present our first award is Armando Holguin.
Thank you very much, Emily. It sort of brings me with great pride in being able to present our our first awardee of this award for a recent alum. She is a fellow classmate of mine from 2005. So I'm here to present the Distinguished Recent Alumni Award to Erin McAleer. Before I go on about her accomplishments, which could take up a majority of my time, I really want to focus on the person that I knew in grad school and the person that I've come to know since we've graduated. I remember Erin always being sort of that person in the class who would always work hard, who would always ask questions during and after class. Her experiences in her field placements with NAMI and NSAW has shown that she's embodied herself in her work and made most of her experience by learning how processes work and building strong professional networks and relationships that made her a wonderful advocate. I can remember in the years after we graduated, Erin has always been someone who looks to help others in our profession by putting together meetups where macro students or macro people in the field could come together and talk shop. Other events are where other recent grads could come together and talk about career advice and also talk about what sort of jobs are open up in the pipe work, as well as being able to interview or learn pointers of people who are interviewing with someone's former boss. So yes, from the beginning, I knew her to be shy, but someone who wanted to learn and work hard in everything that she did, and it shows in what she's been able to accomplish in her years after graduating. And I will have to honestly say that I'm very proud of the things that she's done, the person that she has become, and from somebody who's graduated with you, I'm very proud of you. Now to talk about what she's done, she currently serves as the Director of Cabinet Affairs for Governor Patrick's office, working on policy issues with his secretaries. Most recently, she was Legislative Director for the Executive Office of Health and Human Services, providing legislative strategy to the Secretary and the 15 agencies under the Secretary. Prior to that, she served as Chief of Staff to the Department of Transitional Assistance, advising the Commissioner in deciding strategic policy, program, budget, and service provision issues. Prior to her roles in state government, she worked at Charles Group Consulting as a senior associate, a firm that specializes in providing government affairs consulting to nonprofits and community-based organizations. She graduated in the School of Social Work in 2005 with a concentration in community organizing, policy and planning, and administration, and is a licensed social worker. And finally, before I go on and present Erin, I do want to talk about the person that I knew in grad school and the person that I'm happy that I'm able to present this on behalf of the board, but that also hopefully this will sort of ease our tension with our conflict that we had in grad school regarding an Excel assignment, which, if you could ask both of us, we would probably come up with different scenarios or, different things that happen in this particular assignment or would-be assignment, but I just want to say that I'm happy to present Erin McAleer as the Distinguished Recent Alumni.
Thank you. Thanks, Armando. I still hate Excel, so that hasn't changed since 2005. So thank you for inviting me here today, and I'm really thankful to be receiving this award and this honor and to be here among all of you. I thought I would just talk a little bit about my career and how I got to be where I am today and why social work is the best path I could have chosen for myself. And go from there. So first of all, I love being a social worker. Even though the work I do, which is currently serving on Governor Patrick's staff, is not often viewed as traditional social work. I am regularly, sometimes several times a week, asked if I'm a lawyer or did I get a master's in public policy. When I answer no, I'm a social worker, the follow-up question is always, so why are you in politics? So today I will tell you why I'm a social worker in politics, how I got here, how my BC education and training prepared me, and why I wouldn't want to be anything other than a social worker. So as Armando said, I currently serve as Director of Cabinet Affairs for Governor Deval Patrick, and as a member of his senior team advising on policy issues. In this capacity, I work directly with all 8 members of his cabinet. So these secretariats are Energy and Environmental Affairs, Public Safety and Security, Education, Transportation, Housing and Economic Development, Health and Human Services, Administration and Finance, and Labor and Workforce Development. No 2 days are the same in my job. One day I may be reviewing a proposal to increase investments in a program to address youth violence. Another day reviewing a brief for the governor on recent efforts to close the achievement gap before he visits a school. And another day meeting with the governor to advise him on next steps to diversify our energy portfolio in Massachusetts. It's really fun work, and I'm fortunate to have a job that I love going to every day. So how did I end up here? I've always been passionate about both politics and social justice. My undergraduate degree was from a fellow Jesuit institution, Holy Cross. And the philosophy of men and women for others is one that has always guided me. In college, I had the opportunity to intern for U.S. Senator, now Secretary of State John Kerry, and then former State Senator Michael Knappich. I knew I loved politics, but through these experiences, I also learned that I would be best in politics if I was focused on the issues most important to me, which have always been human and social services. Shortly after graduating from Holy Cross, I contemplated how to merge my passion for politics and social justice, and briefly contemplated a career in journalism, but I wasn't very good at it, so that's why it was very brief. But a very wise social worker guided me in a new direction, my mother. My mother is a clinical social worker, and she informed me that the social work profession was born out of social and political advocacy. She told me about Frances Perkins. Frances Perkins was a social worker who was the first woman to be appointed to the cabinet of the US president. As President Franklin D. Roosevelt's Secretary of Labor, Perkins drafted much of the New Deal legislation in the 1940s. In telling me about Frances Perkins, my mother convinced me that social work was the path for me. I decided to attend BC because of the Jesuit commitment to social justice and enrolled in the Community Organizing, Public Policy, and Administration program. As Armando said, during my graduate studies, I interned for the Mass chapter of the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill and for the Mass chapter of the National Association of Social Workers, doing legislative advocacy for them. My first job out of graduate school was as a research analyst for the legislature's Joint Committee on Mental Health and Substance Abuse. What was truly unique and interesting about that office is that of a team of 5, 3 of us were trained in the mental health field. The state representative I worked for was and is a clinical psychologist, and the staff director at the time was a fellow social worker. So there are 3 individuals trained in the mental health field working in politics and reviewing legislation and budgetary proposals around issues such as civil commitments, treatment for provided in our prison systems, and mental health parity. It was definitely a unique scenario and one that I wish would be replicated more often. My next job was as a fiscal policy analyst for the Executive Office of Administration and Finance, which is essentially the governor's budget office. Governor Romney was the governor at the time, and I was approached. I remember I went for coffee, and they said, we want someone that can do all the social worky accounts. So I joined that team, and I was the budget analyst for a lot of the agencies within Health and Human Services, Veteran Services, Transitional Assistance, immigrants and refugees. It was a tough job, though, because obviously with that governor, I had very different views on things, but a great experience nonetheless. My next position was with a lobbying firm, and as much as I hated to be referred to as a lobbyist, what drew me to this particular firm was that it specialized in the causes and programs that I care most about. I advocated for, and sometimes against, legislation and budgetary requests on a wide range of issues: homelessness, immigrant rights, voter rights, elder services. After 5 years there, I again returned to state government, this time as Chief of Staff for the Department of Transitional Assistance. In that position, I directly served the commissioner in management and oversight of the agency that serves 800,000 low-income individuals. In May of 2012, as Armando said, I moved over to the Executive Office of Health and Human Services to work as legislative director. There are 15 agencies under Health and Human Services, so I was working directly with each of those 15 agencies on their legislative agendas as well. I was charged with advancing the governor's priorities in the legislature. In my first week on the job, I was asked to help pass legislation around containing healthcare costs. And I think it was the next week that I had to work on passing legislation to make sure Massachusetts was in compliance with the Affordable Care Act. Other priorities included raising revenue, including funding to reduce youth violence, advancing policies to reform the delivery of services for children, youth, and families, and pushing legislation to raise the age of juvenile jurisdiction from 17 to 18. Of course, we cannot always be proactive in pushing the agenda we would like and respond to crises and issues as they arise. While at EUHHS, some of the issues included EEE deaths last summer due to mosquitoes, the meningitis outbreak resulting from a compounding pharmacy here in Massachusetts, and then the constant focus on EBT cards and EBT card issues in the Boston Herald. This past May, I joined Governor Patrick's team as Director of Cabinet Affairs, working on policy issues. When people ask me what a typical day is or what I tend to focus on, I have no answer. My job is ideally dictated by the governor's priorities, but more often than not by what the press, the legislature, and all of you are focused on. I'm always working on a wide array of issues, and I constantly have to insert myself into areas of state government in order to get the answers that but really the governor, needs. In this capacity, being involved in such a wide range of issues across all of state government, I am never able to go deep into an issue. Like, I'm hoping none of you ask me specific questions about transportation or energy policy. Often the most I often know is who's really angry, because that's who's calling. It's an exciting job, and I'm challenged every day, and without a doubt, BC and the social work education helped prepare me. First, the Jesuit education steered me towards a career in public service and instilled in me a passion for social justice. Second, even though in this position I am working on issues new to me, such as energy and transportation, every position prior to this one was focused on issues that I was educated in social work school: mental health, homelessness, access to healthcare, welfare. I cannot overstate how valuable this is. Although I am often asked, are you a lawyer? I would say I'm more often asked, Erin, can you work on this issue because of your social work background? It's definitely unique to be a social worker in politics, and I think that's a really good thing. Beyond just the education, the training I received in social work school has been helpful throughout. In both my field placements, as I said, I worked for advocacy organizations. These are the organizations most often lobbying the administration, and the ones sometimes bad. I know what they will support and when they will question a decision, why a decision was made, and why I should always inform them ahead of time before a decision is made so they're aware of what's going on. Which leads me to the next skill I've gained as a social worker, and possibly the most important skill I use in my everyday work: how to listen and communicate, especially when it's difficult conversation. One thing is certain in this job: we can't please everyone. Everyone is asking for the governor's time, support, and to make their issue his #1 priority. Sometimes we have to make decisions that result in a lot of organizations and people being angry at us. For whatever reason, I'm often the messenger, whether it's to the governor, to a cabinet member, to a legislator, or to an advocacy group. And I'm fortunate to have gained the skills to be able to talk professionally and politely about why a certain decision was made. Further, as all of you know, social workers have an inherent ability to read people well, often through just body language. I know when someone is not responding well to a certain proposal, and likewise, I know what may gain their support. I often find myself using someone's own phrasing back to them, which I know is a strategy also used in clinical social work. Another important skill I use every day is critical thinking. As in clinical social work, I have to analyze the various systems and determine the motivation behind a certain action. For example, why did the Boston Globe come out against our proposal? I have to use evidence-based research to determine the appropriate intervention. Has this policy worked before? Did Connecticut or New Hampshire try it out and it worked well? And then I have to find the appropriate intervention. Is it legislation, or should we amend regulations? Or more importantly, do we have to win over the press and the public before we even take another step? So finally, how does my experience and skill set translate into my everyday work? I figured I'd give you a few good examples. When I was at the Department of Transitional Assistance, the Boston Herald's attack on EBT cards first began. I sat with many legislators and explained to them the realities of being in poverty that many of you know all too well. Number one being that many poor people do not have a bank account. You would be surprised, but this was very shocking news to legislators. They thought there was no reason for EBT cards because everybody should just have a debit card. When I was at Health and Human Services, the horrible tragedy at Sandy Hook took place, and I was in meetings where I advocated very strongly for gun laws, but also in the same vein, voiced a concern that we not reinforce the stigma that individuals with mental illness are more violent than others, and worked on press releases to make sure that that distinction and that there was no way that we were reinforcing negative stereotypes. In my job in Governor Patrick's office, I've been working on issues around homelessness, and I am the constant, probably sometimes annoying voice, talking about how the issue is really about poverty. It's not about people not having a home, it's about poverty. Fortunately, in working for Governor Patrick now, and as part of his administration for the past few years, I work with someone who understands and agrees with the social justice perspective. In closing, social workers have such an important role to play in policy development, and I hope that many of you will be actively engaged in the political world, even if just in your free time. Social workers absolutely should be at the table in policies being developed that impacts not only you, but your clients. I teach at the BU School of Social Work, and students often tell me, well, I'm not an expert. And then I counter with, so a legislator who only has a law degree has better expertise in determining which mental illnesses the state should mandate that health insurance cover, and even more importantly, how many treatments that client is allowed to have. Decisions are made every day that you probably have more expertise in than anyone else at the table. So I really hope you get yourself to the table. Thank you again for giving me this award. Again, I love being a social worker, and it's really a privilege to stand here amongst all of you who do great, excellent work every single day. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Here to present our next award is Susan Moriarty and Brenda Vitale.
Hi, I'm Susan Moriarty. This is Brenda Vitale. We are co-nominators of Amy Vosburg-Casey for the Distinguished Alumni Award. When the request for nominations for the Distinguished Alumni Award first came out, my first thought was of Amy Vosburg-Casey, a superstar graduate from 2001. And my only hesitation was that Amy would think she hadn't accomplished enough yet, that she wouldn't want the recognition for this award. So I called my friend Brenda, who knows Amy better than I, and asked her what she thought.
I said, Amy certainly deserves an award for a lot of things. I'd start with her fabulous taste in songwriters, the way she tears apart a New York Times, and the fact that she can take you to the tastiest place to shop for pork products. But the truth is, in all seriousness, there isn't anyone who has more passion and justice weaved into their work. So this is the official nomination.
Hailing from Omaha, Amy holds an undergraduate degree from the University of Notre Dame and dual graduate degrees from Boston College in law and social work. A graduate of the dual degree program in 2001, Amy's career before, during, and after attending BC has been dedicated to social justice and the tenets of social work.
And as a BC employee who works in admission, I can assure you that just getting into the joint degree program is an accomplishment in and of itself.
Prior to graduate school, Amy served as a Jesuit volunteer for 2 years as an ESL and science teacher in the Marshall Islands. The Jesuit Volunteer Corps emphasizes that its volunteers be conscious of the poor, attuned to the causes of social injustice, and dedicated to service informed by faith. During their service, they immerse in and reflect on 4 Catholic Ignatian values: spiritual growth, simple living, community with other JVs and those they serve, and the pursuit of social justice. Amy has put these Jesuit values into practice throughout her life.
When Amy joined the JVC, she said she wanted a more real-life experience, and I'm not for sure that meant living on an island that was 1 mile wide or 1 mile long and 200 yards wide, but it certainly was real.
During her time at Boston College, Amy worked at the Harvard University-run Legal Services Center, the Boston Tenant Coalition, and the Juvenile Rights Advocacy Project based at the Boston College Law School.
She also was the winner of the Father Robert Drennan Award for graduates working in public interest law.
Her GSW internships were at Brighton High School and the Boston Redevelopment Authority. She also volunteered for a homeless shelter during graduate school and was on call at night to find placements for people in need.
Please, field, plug your ears. She might have taken in some homeless clients when there were cold nights.
In 2001, she joined the Georgia Justice Project, first as the John A. Pickens Fellow, then as a staff attorney. The GJP's mission is to defend indigent clients in criminal cases and, win or lose, stand with them as they rebuild their lives. They combine their free legal services with social services and employment support.
When Amy originally moved to Atlanta for the summer, we were all surprised when she decided to go back, but her heart was in Atlanta. More importantly, Georgia is the only state which does not provide counsel, the right to counsel for people with death sentences.
In 2005, Amy became Deputy Director of Mitigation and Investigation at the Office of the Georgia Capitol Defender. This office was created to provide free legal representation to clients facing the death penalty, as well as to act as a resource for lawyers representing defendants in capital cases. Prior to the establishment of this office in 2005, there were few standards in Georgia for defending clients in capital cases, and public defenders were ill-prepared for the complexity of such cases. In 2008, she joined the Georgia Resource Center as a staff attorney. The GRC is a small nonprofit law office which provides free, high-quality representation to indigent, death-sentenced Georgia prisoners in state and federal habeas corpus proceedings, challenging their capital convictions and death sentences. In this role, Amy has worked tirelessly up until the final minutes of a client's appeal to overturn a death penalty conviction.
Can also testify to the tirelessness part. I remember on a vacation waiting up till midnight just certain times to hear about court appeals.
Social justice is always guiding Amy, and in her personal life, she continues to be an active volunteer with the Open Door community in Atlanta, a residential community in the Catholic worker tradition. This organization provides numerous forms of assistance to the homeless and those who are imprisoned. Amy could have graduated from BC and gone on to work at any high-powered law firm of her choosing. Instead, she has pursued a career path dedicated to public service, representing those facing life imprisonment or death. She has chosen a path that most lawyers would avoid due to the long hours and low financial return. Clearly, social work values continue to influence her. Amy has seen the urgent need for high-quality public defenders to protect some of the poorest members of our society and has dedicated her career to filling this void. Simply put, Amy is an amazing person and one who is extremely worthy of recognition as a distinguished member of the GSSW.
Amy introduces herself as a social worker with a law degree, and I'd now like to introduce her and let her share her contagious laugh and, more important, her passion for social justice. This is Amy.
Thank you all, and thank you everyone. That was much too kind, as Brenda said I would say, because it's true. But I'm very glad to be here, and this was a great reason for me to come back, because I haven't been back for quite a while. I want to start by just thanking, there are too many people for me to thank for where I am and the work I've been able to do, but I want to thank my family, many of whom are here today, and my father, Bruce Vosburg, my mother-in-law and father-in-law, Betty and Tom Casey, and my daughter, Elena, who are all a great part of why I'm able to do the work I do. Because as everyone in this room knows, doing work in service of others takes a lot out of us, and we need people to fill us back up. And so thank you all for that. And I want to thank Susan and Brenda for thinking of me and bringing me here. I'm very grateful for that. And it's true, I do believe that social work was primary to me, and law was something I felt I needed to do to have an extra group of tools to advocate for people. But I was mentioning and remembering with Brenda that when I was in social work school, I felt like it was what kept me sane so that I could go to law school. And it was what grounded me. because law school is an artificial construct where you learn artificial structure and way of talking and way of being. And it's valuable because it's a way to help people, but it's not real the way the work we do is real. And in light of that, I really just want to start off with a story about a client of mine. I'm going to call him Bill, and he is currently serving a life without parole sentence in Georgia for the case that I worked on. And I wasn't his lawyer, I was his mitigation investigator. And for folks who don't know, it doesn't just happen in the death penalty context, so you may know from public defenders or people in that arena. A mitigation investigator is a person who spends their time researching and learning every aspect of a client's life history. So from birth, from actually pre-birth and up to the point where you get the client, learning everything about their health history, their schooling, their family dynamics, mental health issues, any developmental disabilities, anything you can think of that makes up a person. And in the death penalty arena, we do that in order to advocate for the person at sentencing. I would say 9 times out of 10, when we got a client pretrial, when I was at the Capitol Defender, guilt was not an issue. The prosecutors would not ask for the death penalty if they didn't know they had a strong case. And so we had to defend our clients against a guilty verdict, but mostly what we were doing was defending our clients against getting a death sentence. And so to that end, we started immediately building up these social histories of our clients, and I think that's something a lot of folks do in our field. In the death penalty field, it's the only place that the legal field acknowledges it has value, and in a formal way. So my client Bill had a pretty bad case. He and a friend had been driving on a country road. They were both high on meth and had a taillight out, and a police officer started to follow them and then turned on his lights, pulled them over. They pulled over, and then inexplicably decided they were going to take off again. And the police officer chased them, and they lost control of the vehicle, and the truck fell into a gully next to the road. The police officer stopped his car and got out and walked over to the truck. My client and his friend had gotten out and tried to take off. The friend successfully got away. My client fell in the gully. And the police officer came up to him with his gun drawn. My client also had a gun, and police officer was shot and killed. This is all on the dashboard video camera from the police vehicle. So there's no question that my client is going to be found guilty at trial. It's also a cop killing, and those are serious, serious cases in the system. I mean, I think we'd say any killing is a serious case, but in the system, cop killings are very serious. So there was no doubt that my client needed a good advocacy for sentencing, and that was my job. And as with any work that we do, there are 2 pieces to it. One is, and to me, the most fulfilling, and the reason I continue to do this work and be sustained, is building a relationship of trust with the client. I spent, I don't know how many hours, meeting with my client, with all my clients in jails and prisons for hours on end, because I'm asking them to tell me about the worst and most horrific parts of their life that they don't want to remember, because that's what's going to save them from the death penalty. And I need to show them the respect that I want them to show me in sharing that knowledge and information. That's very difficult to disclose. But it is the most rewarding part, and I really enjoyed meeting with Bill, who's a very smart person, funny. We had a lot of very interesting conversations. And as a result, I learned a lot about his family and his background, of course, and learned about how he got to be in the situation where he shot and killed a police officer. But I want to share one meeting I had with him because it sort of encapsulates why social work is so important to me and so important to our world. And I also think it encapsulates why coming here to a Jesuit institution, to an institution that's motivated by faith and social justice, makes a difference. Bill and I were sitting facing each other at a table, and it was a contact visit, which I don't always get, but it was nice. And there was a plate glass window right next to us, a big, huge plate glass window. And it looked out on this courtyard that was very small, maybe 20 yards by 20 yards. It had one tree in the middle. I'm not sure why it was there. And we're talking about his case or what's going on with the hearings that are happening. And a hummingbird comes and hovers right here. And just, there's no tree right there. It's just maybe looking at the window thinking it's another hummingbird. I don't know. But it stayed there for a really long time. And Bill looked over and immediately was reeling off all his knowledge about hummingbirds. Well, you know, hummingbirds' hearts beat really fast. It's like 150 beats per minute, and when they're flying, it's 1,200 beats per minute. And that's why they don't live very long, because their heart runs out of energy. And unlike the elephant, whose heart beats 30 times a minute, and they live forever. And so, I mean, that moment happened early in my career in doing death penalty defense, and has stayed with me for obviously till now, very powerfully, because Bill is what our society would call the worst of the worst. He's what we would think of as a throwaway person, as a society. I don't mean us, but you know, there's no value to his life. Let's put him in prison and let's execute him, because there's nothing redeeming for a person who killed a police officer, on purpose especially. But that story is, for me, a powerful example, and there are many other stories I could tell, of the fact that I am honored and privileged to get to spend time with these people that society wants to write off. And I think, you know, people facing the death penalty are an extreme example, but I'm sure anyone who does social work feels this, that we are advocating for people that our culture does not value, to some extent or another, that we are advocating for them in two ways. One way is to empower them to advocate for themselves, and the other is to give voice to them in different arenas, like the political arena, where Erin works, to take their life stories to people who wouldn't normally hear them, and to find a way to convey the value to those people so that there will be change and there will be justice. And that's, I think, in my career path, how I have found the work I do now, because it is, for me, a crystallization of that. And it's a chance to work very intently on just a few people's lives, which is, it's difficult and challenging, but it's also a gift, because a big problem for a lot of social workers is that we don't have a lot of time with our clients. You know, because of the nature of the need and the way the systems are set up, we have very brief interactions with our clients. That was true when I was doing criminal defense work. I never felt like I had enough time. And I had a lot more time than public defenders have. So that's why I do the work I do, is because it gives me a chance to learn another person and to then, I think, more effectively advocate for them in the system. And I don't think I would have come to this place if I hadn't been driven primarily by my faith and my belief in social justice, which I attribute to coming here, to graduate school, to being at Notre Dame, and whether I appreciate the institutions as a whole or not, they certainly gave me opportunities and opened doors for me into places I wouldn't have found otherwise, like the Catholic worker movement and going to Micronesia and things like that. So I'm very grateful to have had that opportunity. And it makes me define what I do in a different way, right? I mean, when I think about what I do, I think about it in terms of finding the beauty in the human person amidst all the ugliness of our societal structures. And being a voice to say, no, you're wrong. I mean, these people are not valueless. And whatever their issues are, whatever brought them to a place where they could kill another person, they still are human and are worth our respect to whatever extent we can give it to them. And I feel very certain that coming here to graduate school, to this social work school, and to other institutions I've gone to, that was what allowed me to see things through this lens, which frankly is much more empowering and sustaining than just fighting for rights and not thinking about sort of what I've learned through my faith of what the human person is and means. So, I mean, I could say a lot more. I'm going to end with a quote from John Deere, who is a former Jesuit just recently. And there are a lot of people I could quote, but I found this one and it seemed appropriate for us and for me. God is a God of prisoners, a God of the poor, a God of the oppressed. But most of all, as the life of Jesus testifies, a God of nonviolent resistors. God is a God of nonviolence and peace. And I think that's what we're all called to do in this room, is to bring peace to the oppressed, and part of that is also bringing peace to the oppressor. And it's a big challenge, but I think we all are a part of making that happen. So I thank you again for letting me speak with you today.
We thank you all for your presence here this morning. It's been a rewarding and fulfilling time together. We look forward to seeing you again. If I could just call your attention to future events on the back of the schedule that you have. In particular, an important event on February 24th, Healthcare Reform from Policy to Practice. We invite you to join us for that important conversation, including Charlie Baker, candidate for governor and former CEO of Harvard Pilgrim, and Angelo McLean, one of our distinguished graduates as well. We might also call your attention to the Pinderhughes Diversity Lecture on March 28th, at which time we'll have the privilege of hearing from Dr. Mary Catherine Bateson. So we thank you again for your presence today. Please feel free to turn in the evaluations and receive a CEU certificate should you like. Thank you again, and we wish you a good day and a good weekend.